Yeah, I'll introduce you
Okay.
very shortly. Then you can start. So just wait for me.
Sure. Cool.
Okay, I think we're good to go. Hi everyone, welcome to this internal research seminar. My name is Anneli. For the ones who are online, there might be some new staff around. I work with communications here at SEI. This internal research seminar series, for those who don't know, is a series here in the Stockholm Center where we usually get researchers to talk about their research projects. It can be from the start of the project to somewhere in the middle or in the end of the project, where there's a chance for the researchers to discuss methodologies and results and lessons learned, etc. This time around, we have quite a little bit different focus, where Daniel, who you'll meet soon, will not talk specifically about a research project or research results, but about how to keep on top of everything in terms of new research coming out and information overload. How do we handle that? So it will be a very interactive session today, and where people can gladly join online by the chat, which Ian, our webcast staff, will keep track on, and also people who are here in the room can ask questions and contribute to the discussions. So now I'll leave the floor to Daniel.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Thanks, Anneli. Good afternoon, everyone. Bon appetit, or småklig måltid. If my Swedish pronunciation lessons have been going right, maybe people understood what that meant. So, like Anneli mentioned, this is not really going to be presenting any new research or results, but it's just more about sharing about how we work as individuals in our research projects, and what tips, techniques, methods we can share with one another about how to keep on top of it all, or not, because that's an option as well. Yes, so Daniel Ddiba is my name. Yeah, those in the room, most of you, I think all of you know me. Hello world, Daniel Ddiba is my name. I'm based here at the Stockholm Center. Maybe just an introduction for those that might be watching online. I'm mostly working in the Sustainable Sanitation Initiative and its associated projects on issues relating to sanitation, waste management, resource recovery, and everything around those topics, so to speak. So, huge disclaimer, I am not an expert on knowledge management. So, if there is anyone that was joining in hoping to hear from someone with a PhD on these issues, with a long list of publications and thousands of citations, I am definitely not the person. But hopefully, that by the end of this session, we can all go away with something of value, having shared with one another from our collective experience and wisdom in the room and online. So, to give a brief introduction of why this session came about, it started with my personal journey as an early career researcher, and wondering if I want to be valuable within my field, I want to be relevant, I want to contribute to topics and issues that are contributing to the sustainable development. And I was wondering, how do I keep on top of everything that is out there on all the literature? So actually it started as a question of, how do I keep on top of all the scientific literature that is out there, these billions, millions of papers that are written and published every year. So I was wondering, how do I keep on top of it all? And in addition, there's all these other formats that are coming up. And as I was talking to a few people here and there, trying to get tips from senior researchers, some of them in this room, I got to learn, maybe it's not a thing about keeping on top of the literature, because that's a limited part of it all, and it's not an end in itself, but it's within this whole bigger sphere of knowledge management. So how do you manage knowledge? And so that's how this session came to be titled as it is. Otherwise, it would have been how to keep on top of the literature, and then it would have been, okay, find papers and things like that. Of course, still, because that's the origin, a lot of the things that I will share here today will be within that particular focus, but I think that our broader discussion should focus more about knowledge, but still from an individual perspective. So how is our session going to run? I'm just going to give a bit of a brief introduction to knowledge management, and then why is it important to us, and why I think personally it's important to me. And then we'll have a broader discussion on 3 key questions. How do you access the knowledge? How do you synthesize it? How do you archive it? All, and then, if time allows, any other business. But I just want to point out, like you saw the first slide, this is Daniel Ddiba featuring the audience. So feel free to stop me at any time. Feel free to come in with a comment, with a suggestion, etc. Yeah. So what is knowledge management? Of course, if you thought about this from a social context, and social media, there is this, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the acronym FOMO, F-O-M-O, the fear of missing out. So this is something that is also, if you turn that from a social context or events to the research context, so knowledge management and keeping on top of the literature also has that bit of element of that. You don't want to miss out on things that are important, and you don't want to concentrate on things that perhaps are not relevant or important. So the field of knowledge management has grown after having emerged as a field of its own from the late 80s and early 90s. And this is a brief, quite direct and simple definition that has been put forth by Davenport. He's an academic in business process innovation and one of the foremost researchers on the issue of knowledge management. So it's the process of capturing, distributing, effectively using knowledge. It's quite simple, direct. But this is, of course, something that covers a wide umbrella because there is issues relating to the individual, but there is also a perspective of organizations and institutions. So, for example, from an SCI perspective, knowledge management could be a discipline that integrates things relating to identifying, capturing, evaluating, retrieving, sharing the entire organization's knowledge and information assets, so to speak. So this could be databases, it could be things like ICT tools like Trace, WIP, LEAP, etc. It could be documents, policies, publications, procedures, and even previously uncaptured expertise that is embedded within the heads of individuals. So this is where things like the SCI intranet comes in. This is where things like doing Office 365. And to capture this organizational perspective, somebody has put forth a definition that that's sort of quite practical, that knowledge management is about getting the right people in an organization to have the right conversations at the right time towards achieving the organization's goals. But for today's session, this is not the focus of our discussion. So we are thinking of things from an individual level, not an organizational level, though there could be implications for the organization. And please feel free to, put forth suggestions or comments about that. Another thing I would like to just briefly point out is that knowledge management and information management, these two are quite different, though they're related. But information management is just a subset within knowledge management, because information is mostly to do with data, the cold numbers and hard facts, but knowledge goes a bit broader into the wisdom, connecting people and processes, etc. Just like this graphic quite tries to detail out. So why is knowledge management important? Of what use is it to us? I think that in our work as researchers, on an everyday basis. We need to find solutions to our own research challenges. So you're trying to find data for a particular thing. In my own work with, for example, the resource value mapping tool, I might be wanting to find data that characterizes a particular waste stream. I want to find out if there is somebody that has published data of that kind. I want to be able to know if somebody has done a tool that sort of mirrors what I'm trying to do, or that could contribute an extra module, or things like that. So that helps me sort of piece together building blocks in my own research work if I know what other people are doing. But then I also need to be able to contextualize the work that I'm doing to see how is it building to the wider body of knowledge that is existing, how is it building to and contributing to practice, how is it contributing to theory as well, yes, in the wider context of systems and frameworks in which the work I'm doing finds itself. But then also we want to be at the cutting edge of whatever it is that we are working on. So as a researcher in sanitation, waste management, etc., I sort of want to be at the cutting edge. That's an individual goal in one way or another, but I also know that it's an organizational goal, for example, because you would want to see SCI keep at the top, for example, of the think tank index, and knowledge management is something that contributes to that, because you want to be able to know what is trending, what's going on in the field, so that you're sort of riding the wave and you're relevant in a way. So it's not just about innovation, but it is also being at the cutting edge of relevance in a way, because there could be innovation just for the sake of innovation, but relevance is also something that is important. And definitely there are implications for research funding as well, because people usually fund things that are trending sometimes, but also things that are relevant to them. And if you're not able to identify that, it means you'll be left on the side tracks. So the problem that comes about as we are trying to tackle knowledge management is that there is a huge explosion in knowledge production. This graph just shows the number of scientific articles in some 4 indexing databases, and these are the number of articles that are added every year. So you can see that recently it has risen to over 3.5 million according to some of these databases. So how do you keep on top of that all? And of course, part of this is issues related to population growth, and meaning that there is also more researchers that are entering into the field. So we are not few, there is more competition. Some people would like to look at it that way. But of course, that also means there is more work if you want to keep on top of things. And in addition to this is beyond just scientific publication. This is a figure from the SCI annual report of 2016 showing the various formats that SCI publishes in. And I'm sure this is quite similar to other research institutions as well, or think tanks. There's policy briefs, there's book chapters, working papers, synthesis briefs, fact sheets, discussion briefs, blogs, there's videos nowadays. So there's a whole wide range of formats. So you could find that there's certain knowledge that is not necessarily captured within scientific articles, but it's within these other formats, and you have to keep on track of that as well. And this is within 24 hours. So there is keeping on top of the literature, but you have to attend meetings, there is project delivery, you have to keep on top of a ton of emails, you have to tweet every day so people find what you're doing or what you're working on. So there's all these demands on a researcher's time. Some people are doing lectures, some people are involved in committee meetings, peer review as well. So there's a ton of things that we have to do. So how do you manage to sort of keep this knowledge management aspect, because it might not be an explicit part of any project that you're doing, except if your research area is knowledge management, of course. But the time demands for all these other things that are also important. How do you handle that? But just to cap off this introduction of why knowledge management is important, is just a quote from a researcher that said, our job as researchers is to push the frontiers of what is already known. We can't push the frontier if we don't know where the frontier is, okay? So this is sort of summarizes why knowledge management is important, but also the challenges that come about with trying to keep on top of it all. So we are going to dive into a discussion that is sort of topical, so to speak, or divided into 3 themes, like I mentioned earlier. And the first is to do with this whole idea of how do you keep on top of it all. So how we are going to do it is I will share a few tips that I have found in my short research journey so far. But you're welcome to comment at any time if something works for you or it doesn't work for you, etc. And then you can supplement and add other things as well. And if you are watching online, please, you are very much welcome to engage. Anneli is following the comments, so feel free to put in a comment or as a way of raising your hand to participate in the room as well. So first of all, from the scientific literature perspective, is that there are tools from databases and indexing databases and publishers. For example, you could get email alerts of table of contents of new issues of journals whenever they are published. This is an example from an Elsevier journal, and this is from a Springer journal. I don't know if you can see that clearly, but you could sign up by email so that you can always get a table of contents whenever a new journal issue is published. Then this is something I signed up for with Mendeley because I have a Mendeley library, so they see what stuff I have stored in my reference management software, and then they propose other things that are not in there yet. So I get about 5 key things every week, and this for me is something that is helpful. I just look at the titles, I'm able to see if it's something that I think is relevant, then I can click and go into details later. And then there's also this issue of getting other email alerts based on keyword searches or search terms, or it could be based on authors. If you know somebody that you clearly want to stalk, so you know all the research they're doing, so that you have a competitive advantage when you apply for funding, for example. But also, the other thing is you could set up alerts for certain documents. I have been told, for example, by one of my PhD supervisors that one tip that she uses is tracking who cites her work. And this is something that is available within many of these indexing databases, is that you can put a particular document and say, whenever somebody cites this work, please let me know. Because of course, this is people that are citing your work definitely are people that are doing things related to what you're doing, or else they would not be citing it. But it can be a good way of sort of keeping track of the trends and where things are going in your field. Then the other thing is, if you have some favorite researchers or research groups or think tanks, you could sign up with their newsletter. For example, ACI has a newsletter. I don't know how many of you sign up to that. But maybe you see all the publications at the entrance, so maybe. But that's one way if you want to keep track of what a particular group is doing. A newsletter could be a good summary of what they are doing currently. Maybe monthly, some do weekly, but maybe depending on your time schedule. There could be social media tools, so ResearchGate, for example, which is specifically for researchers. There's Twitter, but there's also Loop. That's also another social media platform for researchers. Twitter has been referred to by some people as one of the most underutilized tools in academia. And I've spoken, for example, to Madeline, who said, this is the one thing that I use. I have my favorite researchers. I make sure I follow them whenever they produce new stuff. Of course, they will tweet about it, and it helps me to know, and I can always, get in direct contact with them. And so it becomes more about just the documents, but also building relationships with people and, potential future collaborations, etc. And then I don't know if any of you use Reddit. I don't, but I have seen they have this Ask Me Anything series. So they invite, it's quite an open platform, but any researcher that has credentials in a particular field can schedule and Ask Me Anything, and people from anywhere in the world will ask them, yes, anything, of course, within their particular field. I've seen people like Bill Gates have had Ask Me Anything. Late Stephen Hawking did an Ask Me Anything series. And so if there is certain researchers that you want to follow, this could be aware. And of course, the way that information on Reddit is presented is, for a popular audience. So it's quite simplified, so it's easy to digest and understand. And it's also quite in small bite-sized chunks. And then the other thing, lastly, that I wanted to share about is in your community of practice. So personally, I sign up to the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance, for example, and there is a rich online discussion forum where people post topics in different categories. It's curated. And this is a very, very good resource because if you have a particular problem, you can post a question, people can help you. If you're looking for literature, people will point you to that because this is a forum that is consisting of about more than 10,000 people in the field. So it's a rich resource to keep track of what is going on. Usually when people publish new stuff, they will post something about that on the forum, etc. But then the other thing is you could do peer reviews. I don't know if some of you are involved in doing peer reviews for journals, but that can be an effective way of knowing what new things are coming out because you get it before the rest of the world hears about it, with the exception of the research group that is producing the work. And then meetings, conferences, events, that can be a way to get a deep dive into a particular topic and meet people as well. And of course, coming to events like internal research seminars, the science forum. Attending my first science forum this year was a huge experience for me, sort of trying to grasp the breadth of all the work that SCI does. So I think this is something that is also important and can contribute to knowledge management, so you know what's going on and how it can relate and finding people that you can collaborate with. I have not been stopped so far, so I will take a voluntary stop here. Comments, questions, suggestions, tips for this past phase?
And the phase is called how to
find it all.
Find it all. Right?
Access it all.
Access it.
It is.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll start with Lindy.
Thank you. Thanks, Anneli, and thank you, Daniel. Very interesting to get this overview. I just wanted to add, I'm not a very good tweeter myself, but I just wanted to emphasize what you said about Madeleine's experience, and also Olle told me actually that he has a very vivid discussion on bioeconomy on Twitter, where he gets a lot of his new information actually, and where he also then takes the opportunity to network, as you mentioned. So if a new study comes out, then he often replies to the author with a question or two, and then you can sort of get the discussion going. So for me, that was a bit of a piece of news that you could use Twitter like that, but that may be something that we should explore more. When you can get into a vivid or a good community like that, it can be a good support. Thanks.
I'm thinking just a quick, before I forget, that also if you send that, sometimes you are interested in a particular study, you send an email to the author and they are busy or they are on leave, but they are still active on Twitter. So perhaps if they won't respond to your email, maybe they will to a tweet, because that's also few characters. So.
Does anyone have here in the room experience with Twitter? I want to say something. Otherwise, I'll give the hand to... Oh, no.
Do I have to say who I am, or people... Is there a camera? Otherwise, it's just a voice in the dark. Arno Rosmarin, right here in Stockholm. So I think SCI is extremely challenged, if you like, compared to most university departments, because we dare to do so many different topics. So each one of us may be experts in a certain core of literature and expertise, but we tend not to overlap. And there's little cells, if you like, of work that we do with each other. That makes it very important that our methods are very sharp and that we share something about how we work. But we haven't done that. And I tried to do this about 20 years ago with Canadian money, with IISD and World Resources Institute and IIED. We had a global network of knowledge managers and tried to compare the methodologies. These institutes are very similar. That is, a whole lot of people with PhDs, but very, very different from each other. So I don't think that really worked that well. It was early. Even Google wasn't that powerful. But I think the most important thing that came out of that work was that you need to connect knowledge management with project management, with fundraising, with the whole strategy of communications. And if you don't do that, it just goes all over the place. It becomes like a vegetable garden full of weeds. And it will be the most successful projects are the ones that have the best knowledge managers. The biggest projects are the ones that have communications at the center. And you build the whole project around those strategies. All the projects that come and go have weak communication systems, networks. So knowledge management is just part of doing your work. So that's I think that's what came out of it. And I think you could probably see, if you do an analysis of SCI's experiences, that the most successful cells or groups of research people are the ones that have really taken on networks and knowledge management and dare to do outreach and a lot of PR and different things like that. Not easy though. It has to be funded. So, and of course, if senior management doesn't see that area as something important, then it drops off. So I think there's probably great successes and horrible failures at the same time.
But that's especially from an organizational perspective, right? Yeah. Okay. Lynn has
comments over here.
a comment here. Yeah.
Yes. Why don't you also introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Linn Jernberg from the Stockholm office. This is, I guess, a comment or an addition to what you were saying, Daniel. I think as an organization like SCI, who's not only trying to be sort of scientifically relevant, but also relevant from a broader society perspective and for policy and practice. I think in addition to staying on top of all of the research that's coming out, I think it's also important to stay on top of, where the public debate is going and staying on top of sort of discussions that are going on in different practice, communities of practice that are working, sort of underground or organizations and politics and so on. There's even more, I think, than what you were already saying. And to some extent, that's also for me at least, borderline work and sort of just private interests, tend to stay on top of those discussions because you're interested in them. But to some extent, you might also need some sort of processes or tools to be able to do that. And in some cases, it's going to be the same. Like Twitter is super useful for that as well, for example. But I think, there are maybe other ways too, and just newspapers and stuff like that.
Interesting, yeah. When you spoke about the borderline between work and private, it reminded me of Effendi's recent comment, I think, in one of the previous staff meetings about a TV show that he was watching and about invoices. So I'm thinking maybe I need to, sort through my Spotify list of artists, so I find some that are doing work related to sanitation, find a few TV programs and, sort of, so that the world is not, but maybe that's a discussion for another day as well. Yeah. Okay. All right. We can move on to the next. Is there any comment online, maybe?
There is.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, just one comment here from Ann Tuo. A good word there for us communicators, knowledge management workers. Would love to be part of a knowledge management node for SCI if ever started. I believe Ann is with SCI Africa.
Okay. Interesting. Thanks, Ann. Nice to know that there are people online, so it's not blank. Okay, so the next question that we could deal with right now is how do you synthesize it all? Because getting it all is one step of the process, and perhaps it's the easiest part. You have gotten all the alerts from journals, you have signed up to all the newsletters, so you have all the working papers that are coming up or the events that are coming up. But how do you carve time to synthesize all that, and how do you put that in your daily routine? A quick quote I would share is somebody that, a former librarian, who mentioned, if you try to read too broadly, too deeply, or too quickly, none of that is good. I think a cautionary tale there with the Swedish principle of lagom. So it's clear that you should not try to do it all at once. And if you feel overwhelmed at any point, it's necessary to sort of take a step back and ask yourself, if I want to keep track of what's going on out there, what's my key objective? What are the key questions I am trying to answer? Or what are the key topics I want to keep track of, etc. So that you sort of have a focused tracking process, so to speak. But also the other question is, where does knowledge management lie as far as you're concerned on this Eisenhower matrix? Do you think of it as something that is urgent and important that you have to do now? Maybe if you're doing a systematic review on a particular topic within that particular context, then that's something that's your work. But of course, this is not about something to do with systematic reviews. It's more about keeping track of what's going on. So it's something that, yes, is important, but oftentimes it doesn't feel like it's urgent because knowledge management doesn't have a deadline. But somehow, if you don't take care of it, it will catch up with you somehow in one way or another. So that's something that each one of us has to reflect about. But a few tips that I have found that different people use to sort of help them synthesize things but also manage within the time constraints is that attending events can sometimes be a very effective way, because you are attending an event maybe for a week at most, or a few days, a day, or a few hours, but then you have a smorgasbord of people sharing from different perspectives. So an example is World Water Week. It's an event that takes a week, 7 days, but then you have people sharing everything about water. So if you just went there for one day, you sort of get, of course you can attend all the events, but if you identify where you feel you have gaps, then you can sort of come out of it all having gained an understanding of, okay, where is this frontier going? What's trending in the world of water right now? It could be conferences, forums, symposia, etc. One other thing when it comes to reading literature is a technique that has been shared by a gentleman called Raul Pacheco, the abstract, introduction, conclusion. As an early career researcher, I shared with Anno, I think some time back, the first book I ever read about sanitation. When I got it, I said, okay, this is an interesting title. I read the book from the first page to the last. I read it like a novel, and then it's later on maybe in academia, maybe things don't work the same way, that you have to read every piece of literature cover to cover. So it's that you focus on what key things you want to get out of this. You don't necessarily need to know everything cover to cover, and you don't need to consume everything. This guy says, look at the title, of course, to know if this is something that I should give more time or not. If you shouldn't give it time, toss it away. But if you think it's something that's relevant to your work, then the abstract. But after that, the introduction, because usually whenever we write introductions, we sort of give a broad overview of where this field is, what has been done, what is being done now, and where it's going. And then at the end of it all, the conclusions sort of summarize what that particular publication or that particular document has contributed to the literature. So that can be a quick way of not spending too much time, but if you find something that you think is really relevant, you can quickly skim through. Of course, it depends. An introduction of half a page, sometimes you find introductions of 10 pages or some introductions of 50. Also, etc. But yeah, these are some of the tips that I have found. As you can imagine, compared to finding things, which was 3 slides or quite many, not many people seem to have different techniques for how to solve this whole time thing and how to synthesize. So this is where you come in. What are your techniques? What are your tips? What do you think works and what doesn't work?
Actually, first, I maybe that also comes into the next bit on archiving. But when it comes to these referencing tools like Zotero and Mendeley, I haven't done the dive into using one of those. I'm sure I will since I'm not a researcher, but it will probably come to a point when I have to. Do they have ways of synthesizing or sifting through information, those tools? Oh, someone is saying yes, someone is saying no here.
Let them tell us.
Well, I haven't used it myself, but I think like Zotero, for instance, you can store the abstract with your reference and you can tag it. So that, in my simple mind, is a way of dealing with, because then you can, if you want to go back to an earlier work, for instance, you can look for that tag in your own library. And Zotero also has the possibility of sharing library with several researchers. So that is an opportunity for us to do more of a topic-based library within the center, for instance, if you want to. So I think there are simple tools available, but maybe some limitations that I don't know about.
Are there better tools out there for reference?
I think the closest one that comes to it is, I think there's some other referencing management tool from an organization called Faculty of 1000. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that. F1000 or something like that. It's quite new, I think a couple of years ago, where they have asked that for a particular field, they have asked people to sign up. To give an example, if it's sanitation, if you think you're an expert, and yes, you have the credentials, sign up to this Faculty of 1000 in the topic of sanitation, and you help curate a list of the top reads that are necessary in this particular field. What are the top documents or articles in this particular field? And I think that's something that helps, but still it's not so much of synthesizing. It's still just curating and archiving in a way, maybe. Yeah.
Aaron, maybe you want to introduce.
It's Aaron Attridge, Stockholm. Yeah, this is really helpful stuff, Daniel. The big thing I struggle with is this all takes time anyway to do researches, and then to use a tool like Zotero, archive and tag, and I don't even have time to read the most important pieces of literature in the field that I work in, which is a huge problem. I feel it anyway. I just feel like I can't even keep up with the absolute ones that I definitely should read, let alone keeping track of, like having time to keep track of other things that I might be interested in or might want to read. I don't know what the solution is, but I think it's really difficult for us then. I mean, it's difficult at a personal level to, as you said, position our work in the right context, to be sure that when you publish something, it's actually pitched in the right space, or you understand that it is something new, or it is going to be controversial or not. Or it's really, really difficult. So I don't know if anyone has better experiences of like trying to really, either it's to do with the way you use your time, or I don't know. But I don't know if it's certain field related. Like there's so much stuff gets published all the time that's just literally impossible to read. Even I don't have the time to read the most important thing that comes out each week or each month. You know?
Thank you. You had something?
Yeah. Fiona in Stockholm. I think I can solve that for you. Just delegate it to me. I have loads of free time. No, but yeah, similar. But just something that's been really helpful for me, I think, is at all levels, like peer review, and not even like formal for a journal, but in terms of colleagues and like sharing things as early as possible with people. Has opened up like avenues to literature that I don't think I would have come across otherwise. Maybe it's a really basic thing, but it's something that you can do fairly quickly and with people that you trust, maybe before it goes to like more formal review. It's a small thing, but
that's the challenge of making sure your work is in the right place.
yeah.
As opposed to finding time to then read the 5 extra references that reviewer sends to you.
Yeah, but if it's in the context of writing something that you anyway have to write, then it's very targeted and often very useful, rather than going out there and trying to sift through a whole lot of other stuff. Someone take the microphone.
Yeah, I mean, I also share this experience of having sort of a second life only for reading on the top of my wish list. Somehow that would be really nice, if you could spend in a parallel track. And I've also felt forced to sort of drop certain conversations that are ongoing, because you really need to make tough priorities then on what you actually read, as you say. So I think this also goes into what Arno said, that we're trying to cover such a large space at SEI, and we are each one of us trying to follow separate tracks, so we can't even help each other that much, maybe, even though of course we can, as you say also. I mean, we should try as much as we can, of course, but then with a specialized track it's hard to do what maybe people in a university department can do, that share more of the common space. They go to the same conferences, they read the same journals, and then they can help each other more, maybe. But so then I think there is one aspect of this, which is how we organize our work and how we, try to work with our project portfolios also to make sure that we have bigger projects with more time for reading, and also more overlapping projects, so that we can then read the same paper maybe for benefits 3 projects and not 1. So that's one aspect, I think.
Yep. Maybe just something that is related to these few comments that have been said. Because one thing I've heard other people do is people form so-called journal clubs where they share a paper they have found. So of course this is typically within a university setting, a department, and the aspects that you've mentioned come up where people are working on the same field, so it's sort of narrow in a way, but it's still helpful in a way, because you're sharing with people what you have found that others might not have found, but it still might be important to their work. And that could be one way. There's people that also create sort of small communities on Twitter. One hashtag that I have followed sometime is the so-called a paper a day. So people that set themselves the challenge of reading at least 1 journal article a day. So it's not detailed reading, but skimming through quickly. And then share 1 line or a couple of lines about what they thought was the key message in that. And then people that follow that hashtag sort of read the tweet instead of the paper and still get the message anyway. But I think what I could synthesize from our discussion here is the importance of sharing with others, because that helps synthesize things. Okay.
Sorry.
Yep.
Could I?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
I can check. Okay.
Yes, comment.
Thanks, Daniel. I think this has been a really interesting discussion to follow, and really nice that you sort of initiated a brown bag on this topic, which is more on the sort of how we work as opposed to what we work on. That's great. But I thought for this section that first introductory quote that you had was great in terms of how to sort of sift through the myriads of literature that's out there. So I find that I always get lost when I don't know what I'm looking for. Yeah. So I try not to start looking until I know what I need. And that's not always possible, but the more specific enough, the more focused you are, the more quickly you can start narrowing things down. So I thought that was a really nicely chosen quote.
Oh, do we have someone online?
Do we, yeah, exactly.
Maybe?
Ian, can we check just so we include them? No more comments?
Okay.
Then, yeah.
We could have a couple more and then, yeah.
Is that all right? Aaron?
Just a quick response. Yeah, I totally get that at the personal level. But then if you go back to like what Arno was saying before about, or what Daniel was saying about how the organization stays at the forefront of what's happening, then you can't just look at something that you already know what you want to find. You're really trying to keep up to date with what other people are publishing, and that's a whole extra layer of. Maybe you can't do it at the personal level. Maybe it has to be at an organization level. I don't know.
So the interesting thing was that the World Bank actually had a different cut on this thing, a different take on what knowledge management is. And they did, this is also during this crazy time about 20 years ago, when KM was just being discovered. They put bots into a public email server for all their stuff. So this bot would go in and look at sentences and pull out like geography, topics, who, and would put together stuff. So I worked there. It was amazing. You could actually go into the public, so-called shared email server. So you decide to publish some of your emails and to share that information. And it actually came out. There were all sorts of really interesting cross-purpose things that people weren't aware of that they were doing in the same country, and a whole lot of. So that's one thing that can be done. Email is a huge gold mine. It's the one single thing we spend the most time on, and it's not used at all. It's all like garbage left in hard disks. So there's so much time spent on formulation of smart emails, and it lost. It's a kind of individual thing. And the other one is the Gates Foundation knows about this. So we got paid for the last 6 years just to work on Susanna, and that the thing that maybe has brought Daniel to where he is on this. So they speak about the word curation, and it's getting the noise level low and the signal level high. And so it reminds me of this thing about sharing what you think is important, and it's a curation of a garden. So it's like taking out the weeds and just keeping those few plants that you want. And if everybody does that, you have a very successful curation process. And so it reminds me of these book clubs, because you can't read all books. But if you join a book club, you get the job of reading one book, and then telling everyone in the whole group what that book is about. So within a week, you get to hear about 20 books or 30 books. You learn stuff. And that's the other one, is that our reading is much too private. We should be within our groups sharing the knowledge from that reading experience. And that should be part of our work. So research shouldn't be an individual lonely experience of having to write the paper, on a Sunday night at midnight or something like that. Should be acknowledged time. And that's maybe where the core money should be spent. Not more topics, but more reading. That kind of thing.
Thank you, Arno. Interesting discussion. Is there one more comment? I think. Okay. Just one,
quick, and then we move on.
We'll get to the last,
So Björn Nyqvist, Stockholm. So we haven't really discussed it, but one way to sight through and prioritize and bring some order to this massive flow of information is to be a bit harder on what kind of journals you follow and what kind of content that you prioritize reading based on basically citations. So when I do literature reviews on a certain topic phenomena that I want to get up to speed with, I'm very harsh on sorting by citations so that I'm sure that I read the most cited stuff first. And of course, you can't apply sorting by citations on novel stuff coming out right now, but the way there is to go by journal so that you don't go through too low-level journals before you go through higher ranked journals. So you can apply this very hard or in a more softer way because it's different to different disciplines and etc. But one benefit is that you with high-level journals often also get shorter papers. So the requirements to write shorter and more condensed and to the point rises with the difficulty of getting into a journal. So that also naturally bring down the noise level on the content that you're trying to get to and the time spent. Yeah.
Excellent.
I think we'll
Thanks,
move
Bjorn.
on.
Okay, so thanks all for those comments and questions, suggestions, and soul searching, perhaps, in some way. Then this last part of our discussion is about how do you archive whatever knowledge it is that you're finding and synthesizing and gaining over time. I'll just share two that I know about. So, of course, someone has mentioned about reference management software, and nowadays they have quite very powerful capabilities in terms of being able to search things. You can tag, very strong capabilities with regards to search. So it's very recommended that if you have stuff that you have found, keep it in there. In a way, it's easy to find it later when you need it. But the other thing also that I would want to share with you is this so-called conceptual synthesis Excel dump. And the whole idea is that when you find good stuff, you dump the main messages from that in an Excel file. Now, some people, because many of these reference management softwares also have annotating capabilities, because you can upload a PDF, you can open it, you can put comments on that, you can highlight and store and then go back to it, but you could also write notes on a particular record. But some people prefer to do that outside of the reference management software. So this is where techniques like this comes about. So what this guy has developed is that you just use a normal Excel file, and you say for every record that you're going to put in there that you have read through the abstract, introduction, conclusions, for example, you note what's the key concept this paper is about, what is the citation, so the detailed citation, depending on whatever citation format you're using, what's the main idea in the paper, a few notes. Does it have any cross-reference to other papers that you have done? Maybe it disagrees, it reinforces, or another paper that uses similar methods that you would want to link. So that's something that you would put in there. Have you found a specific quote that you think you would like to use in future, and what page is that quote? But the other thing is that you also, it goes back to this discussion we've been having on how can you be more focused. So as a person working in sanitation, I could decide the key themes that I want to follow in the world of sanitation is I want to follow the issue of resource recovery. So when good papers come out on the topic of resource recovery in sanitation, I will dump them in here. If I find papers about technologies, new technologies that have been developed, evaluation of technologies, I will dump them in here. If I have papers on the issue of climate change and its connection or contribution to sanitation and its connection to climate change, if that's a theme I want to follow, then I would put all the papers on that theme in there. And if I also have another theme of sanitation planning, for example, waste management planning, and all papers or things that are related to that particular theme. So it comes down then to, at a particular time in your career, for example, you might have specific topics that you really want to track. Maybe, you don't want to keep track of everything, but you want to focus and have some few manageable, overarching thematic areas that you want to keep track of. And this could be one way to sort of also synthesize, but also to archive the information that you're finding, because later you can easily come to this to draw on if you're doing your own publications and your own research. In this format, it can be easy to draw on and develop further ideas and contributions to your own research. Yeah. Any comments, thoughts about this technique?
I think it seems interesting and useful. Oh, yeah. Shall I go for Linda first?
Thank you, Daniel, for an interesting overview and talk. Linda Bell here from Stockholm, if anybody's watching online. I'd just like to take the time to mention that, as probably in this room we're most of us aware of, but maybe not all of us, that we do have some pretty high-level expertise within SEI on evidence-based synthesis methods. It's sometimes believed that these methods are so rigorous that it will take you a year or something to go through one of these reviews. But actually there are quite a lot of different levels of reviews, ranging from maps that are quite easy to do in a few weeks to more encompassing and larger reviews. But take the chance to talk to Neil and Biljana and Caroline while she's still here, to also chat with colleagues on what you can do and maybe include in your project, if possible, a part where we actually make use of this method. We will also be signing up with the Center for Environmental Evidence, which is the leading organization in this field. We're just signing an MOU with them this month. So we will be connected to this organization also in the long term. So, yeah.
Cool. A quick comment on that, maybe. I was talking to Neil. He wanted to give some input to this session because he's not going to be around. Well, it's not going to be around. And he mentioned his top tip: if you want to keep track of a particular thematic area, first find out if a systematic review has been done on that particular theme. Yeah, so that's something. Yeah, and of course this Excel technique, because I have seen some of the work. Most of the work that systematic reviews involves is that they use similar Excel techniques. Though of course the headings up here could be different depending on the aim of the systematic review, but they use techniques such as this. Yeah. Maybe one last comment. Okay.
Yeah, so Björn again. So thanks again for sharing this. I've used versions of this both for Excel and just simple Word files many times over my years as a researcher. And for me, the key thing that this does is not that you necessarily build up a big database, because it sort of gets on top of the work that you do with the reference manager, but that when you read a paper and you have something that you want to use at a later stage, oftentimes you're not working on that exact project or writing process right at the time you're reading it. It might be like one day ahead or a week ahead or even a month ahead, but at some point you want to know what it was that was so interesting with a paper. And having a file of some kind, just linking the reference to the content snippet that you were thinking of when you read it, is so valuable. And it could be even simpler than this. It just needs to be the reference and your note, basically, in whatever format or tool that you choose. It could be Evernote, it could be on paper, basically. So it doesn't matter which technique you use, but to have that link to help your mind is very important and very helpful.
We have online. I think it's 1 o'clock, but is it okay for people to stay on a couple of more minutes?
Sure. We're just in that zone right now, so.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see what they say online.
Yeah, I'll just share a short bit from Cleo, who mentions the IISD Earth Negotiations Bulletin using Slack. And she points out that it's a platform for discussion, reflections, and that it's much better than email because people already experience information overload via email. And this is a way to share FYI info without contributing to such overload. So, from Cleo.
Thanks, Cleo. And I think Slack has similar capabilities to some extent, like Microsoft Teams, actually. So,
yes, that's
very
true.
helpful. Yep.
That's true. There's many different platforms like that out there. Any more comments?
A quick suggestion.
Yes.
While someone was talking, that now what the comms team does is once a month or something, we get a newsletter that says, here's what's happened on SCI's website, and we get this. These articles were downloaded. Meet Marie was the top article for this month, whatever. Wouldn't it be perhaps even more interesting if they turned that same process but towards external publications rather than our website? So if they could review top-level journals each month and say, these are the articles, or these are the topics that were trending in those journal articles, these are the ones that were picked up in media, maybe it would give us a much better sense of where public debate is, what topics are being published on.
Public.
Public debate.
Public debates or academia? Oh, that's a lot of work, I reckon. Yeah. So Ylva sends out sometimes these media emails where she synthesizes a bit. But yeah. Yeah. Kind of. Oh, hello. Wait. We're just about to find out. Oh.
Interesting. Welcome, Andrea.
We're looking at that. So we're looking also at a some kind of a newsletter that will come up every 3 months with actual, maybe not so much from Twitter, but from our media exposure. So true, yeah, true. We're also, I mean, it's part of a media strategy that Ylva is looking at the moment. So stay tuned. But I hear you.
We'll take that on board for discussions in the team.
Just a quick comment on that. I think some of these indexing and database tools as well have capabilities to track media mentions as well. I was surprised recently because I have a Mendeley profile, which also links to Scopus, so they sort of can see the publications I have done and even track. Connect that also to see where my name has been mentioned in media. So before the summer, we did a blog post with Katia that we published on the World Bank Water blog. But it was then cross-blogged, or cross-posted, or reblogged on the World Economic Forum blog and then on some other news sites. So I was just looking at this page where they're supposed to be showing me, what citations my work has gone in, and I see there is also a metric for media mentions. And then they were listing all these other media sites that had picked up that blog, and I realized, oh, okay, interesting. It's a nice tool to know as well. But then that's so much of, I don't know if it has capabilities also to look topic-wise, I don't know, but from an individual level with regards to impact of your work or where it has reached. That's something you could look at.
Okay, I think we have to stop there.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Let's give a big round of applause.
And thank you to the audience for contributing to a great discussion. Thanks a lot,
Thank you online
everyone.
for participating.
And everyone online, yeah.